Hi everybody, it's Brooke, and today we're going to talk about speed reading. Some people don't like the word speed reading because it sounds like some sort of weird magical trick. Really, speed reading is just reading faster. It's not as if there's only one method to doing this. It's not as if you can do just one little thing and then suddenly pop, you read 100% faster. Reading faster actually involves you just being a little bit more careful about the way that you go about things. The first principle of reading faster is to be aware. When I started trying to learn to read faster, the first thing that I did is I started to pay attention to what I was doing. I started timing myself each time I would read a chapter in a book. So I would get out my book, let's say I'm reading Moby Dick, and if I had to read the first chapter for homework, what I would do is I would time myself maybe every 10 pages. I would set a goal for how fast am I gonna read these 10 pages. I would set my stopwatch and I would start reading. And then if I get to the end of the 10 pages, I'm gonna look up and say, oh, did I do it? Right? Because suddenly if you turn it into a little bit of a mini race, and you can do this even in shorter spurts if you want, or longer spurts if you want. But if I could turn it into a little mini race, I started to pay attention more to how fast I was reading, and I stopped having that problem, and maybe this is something that you've experienced before, especially if you're not somebody who loves to read, that problem of like totally drifting off into some netherworld while you're in the middle of a book, right? Like you're reading, la, 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 and then it starts to get confusing and boring, and then you wake up like a page later and you go, what? Where am I? And how did we get to the library, right? You have no idea what happened for about a page and a half. And then you have to go back and then you start it again. And then somewhere in there, maybe you get a little bit farther and then it happens again, right? This was me perpetually in high school. But timing everything really helped me to get over that because suddenly it was like I was in a race. I'm going and I have a purpose and I'm moving more quickly. So as soon as you start to pay attention, if you can create some timing drills and things like that, you're gonna be able to do a better job. Keep track of your reading speed, figure out what it is, time yourself, and begin this process of assessing where you're at so that you can then progress. The second thing that you want to do is you want to read with a purpose. And what I mean by that is when you sit down to read, you don't want to feel aimless. Let me give you a metaphor that might explain what reading with a purpose would be like. My dad told me when I was a kid about shopping, right? When I was a kid, I loved to shop. For me, shopping was like an extracurricular activity because it's fun and I'm just gonna see what strikes me, right? And you might end up buying a purse, you might not end up buying anything. You might try on some clothes, you might try on some perfumes. But for him, shopping was a task to get checked off the list. So the way that he shopped is that he would show up at the store, he would know what he wants, socks. He would go into the store, find the socks, right? Find the most adequate pair of socks as quickly as humanly possible, bring them to the register, check out, and get out of there without getting hurt. There's a lesson to be learned in this, and that is when you have a purpose and you know exactly what you're looking for, and your goal is to get it, and then get out as soon as possible, you focus on it more, and you also are able to achieve it in less time. And reading is kind of a similar pursuit because a lot of people who read are lovers of reading. And when they love to read, they think, oh, reading is what I do on my Sunday afternoon. That was never me, by the way, when I was in high school, and I don't know if that applies to you or not, but I have great news for you if you don't like to read. What it means if you don't like to read is that actually you might be able to read faster, more easily, because turning reading into something that's task-oriented is going to be a lot easier for you. Every time you read anything, there's several things that you need to figure out. Number one, you've got to figure out the plot. Who's doing what to what, and how do I understand this? I have to know what every paragraph is about. So what I'm constantly doing as I try to read quickly is that I'm summarizing each paragraph. That's my method, and that's my goal as a reader. Number two, you want to figure out the author's tone, right? You want to figure out what's the point of view of this author, what's their take on this, what's their vibe. And I always think of that as a little bit like acting class, right? Like if you were an actor and you were reading this passage and you want to know what the tone is, it's the emotion that you would have as an actor as you read it. So that's also a little bit of what I do as I read, is I try to embody what the voice is of this person a little bit in my head, or I try to take on or assume that personality a little bit. But again, that's something that doesn't have to be verbal. It can be vibe. Thing that I want to talk about is probably the number one thing that I hear come up whenever people talk about speed reading, right? And that's subvocalization. Subvocalization is essentially the idea that when you read something, your throat moves and you have this voice inside of your head that's basically reading the material along with you silently. When we go through the process of reading something on a page, we first have to use our eyes, right? We have to turn those words into actually a sound then, and then we turn the sound into a meaning. What if we could not hear the words aloud, but just look at them and know what they are? For example, if I wanted to call somebody that I knew, and I saw my phone sitting on the table, all I have to do is look over at my phone and grab it. I don't even have to think of the word phone, right? Oh, I need to call mom. I never thought the word phone. Same thing with these words. If you can see that word and know what it means and not have to hear the word, that's the secret to subvocalization. Look at the word like didgeridoo, and you could try to imagine like a funny instrument. But if you look at the word didgeridoo and you can think, I don't have to say that whole word out, and I can know, oh, that's that big long instrument, and I don't have to hear it. Now, here's the thing about stopping your subvocalization. You've just got to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying until it clicks a little bit. And it's not easy, and it's kind of a weird thing to pull off, but it is possible. I know because I do it. But it took me a while, and it took me getting into college and knowing that I just had to practice it over and over and over again until I could get a hold of it. That's the nature of stopping your subvocalization. And my best advice for you in terms of how to practice it and how I practiced it when I first actually learned it, what you do is you get out your sentence, like our didgeridoo sentence, and you look at a chunk of words, right? And then you look away. And then you try to look back at them and think about their meaning without actually hearing them aloud. If you can look at it and know what it is and have that meaning embedded in your brain without the language element, you can read a lot faster. Reading in chunks has to do with the idea that our field of vision can usually hold more than one word in it at once. So one of the things that you can do to read faster is rather than physically move your eyes toward one word, then the next word, then the next word, what you can actually do is you can look at a couple words at a time, right? My eyes can see about this far out. That can fit a couple of words at a time. It doesn't have to be one word. It could be 5 words, maybe 2 words, 3 words, depending on their length. If you read in chunks, you can get a little bit more information in less time. So let's take a look at a sentence. We can practice together. So you can see this first little practice piece. We have the first one you see I've separated one tiny chunk at a time. That might be how you're chunking out your words right now. The didgeridoo, believed to be the world's first wind instrument, okay? So maybe that's how small your pieces are right now. So we're gonna take a look at the next one. So now I can look at the didgeridoo at once. Then I can look at believed to be, then I can look at the world's first, and then I can look at wind instrument. And I wanna point out something else too. If you notice how in these little chunks, I've also bolded some words. And what I would call those words are significant words. So one of the other things that I do when I speed read is I actually don't read all the words on the page. Now, when you're reading for class or for anything else, you never get a gold star for reading every word. You only get a gold star for knowing what it means. And I don't think you really need to know the word the or an in most cases when they're used in the English language, and they take up a huge number of the words in any given paragraph, anywhere, right? So if you just skip over those words, ignore them, and don't even read them, you're going to cut down your reading speed. So you can see I don't even read that, didgeridoo. Believed, be the world's first wind instrument. It kind of tells me a little bit about how these words are related. And I can even trim this down in terms of importance, right? And you see my third one, and I've created bigger chunks, and now I've bolded fewer words because I'm just paying attention to what's most important. Didgeridoo, believed, first wind instrument. I got the whole idea of that sentence with basically just really focusing on those bolded words. So my reading in chunks strategy is actually not just reading in chunks, but it's also when you read in those chunks, focus on the pieces that are most important. And then you can really understand the sentence without having to spend a ton of time, right? If you're trying to read faster, another thing that you can do is you can get physical. If you read the Wikipedia page on speed reading, they call this meta-guiding, which makes you sound very fancy. But all it actually is using something like, say, an index card, or even your fingers, or a finger, to go through the passage and push yourself to go faster, right? It's like a metronome. If you've ever played an instrument, right, and you use a metronome so that you play on the beat, it's the same thing with reading, but you move your hand across the page, right? Or you move your index card down the page at sort of a steady pace, and that pushes you to keep going. Just that one little piece of physical attentiveness can clue you in and help you read a little bit faster. Last thing that I want to tell you in terms of getting better at reading faster, and this is the number one thing that you need, practice. The great news about practicing is that you have an opportunity almost every day of your life to read something. The only way to become a better speed reader is to build that brain muscle and to work on each of these techniques or whatever other techniques you find that help you cut down that time of processing written information. Try to avoid subvocalizing. You can try to look at a few more words at once at a time. And then you can also try to ingest as you go just what's most important. And again, to have this mentality of I'm gonna get in, I'm gonna get out, and I'm not gonna get hurt. Some people have said that when you speed read, you only get 80% of the content in 20% of the time. And that's their principle, that you can't read perfectly and always speed read. And I agree that when you start to incorporate some of these techniques, you might drop something here or there. But on the whole, if you incorporate some of these ideas, what I think you can find is that you can build out your own sort of method of reading faster and effectively that's really efficient and also creates a good amount of comprehension. That's it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. We're gonna have lots more videos in this vein of helping you be a better learner. Like us on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, check out our blog that goes along with this post, and all the other cool stuff that we have there. And I will see you next time on Super Tutor TV.